We are working on that, and we are very much trying to help Kenya and Kenyan producers to make sure that the various agricultural products, such as beans and peas, are in full compliance with our standards. I recognize they are strict, but that is something that European consumers very much expect. We've had our problems inside Europe as well, let's be clear. And they were serious ones.
No, just thinking, I mean, if you have harsh compliance rules, that makes it very difficult for us to conduct business. I mean, Africa conducting business with Europe, and when you're talking about the third P, which is prosperity, it makes it very hard to achieve.
Well, there are many comments on that. I mean, one of them is obviously relating to our economic partnership. I think it's quite important that we start realizing that we have a deep and long-standing economic partnership. That means that it is high time that we conclude our negotiations on an economic partnership agreement. High time. We had excellent meeting with in June and in July with Deputy President Ruto and with Cabinet Secretary Phyllis Kandia. We now need to meet urgently. The Trade Commissioner, European Trade Commissioner Karel de Gucht, has set a meeting for the end of this month. That meeting has to be conclusive. We cannot continue to continue. We are for 95%, the thing is done. So I'm just very, very keen that that is something we can put behind us, because it will create certainty also for business. And I think it is important to say that the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, the Kenyan Private Sector Alliance, the whole Kenyan business community, including the agricultural producers, are strongly behind this deal. There's not a single other trade partner than the European Union which is offering a similar deal of duty-free, quota-free access for all products.
Why is it some sections of our population, or some experts or con-experts, are resisting the economic partnerships, and they see it as a neo-colonial instrument? Why is that so? There has been a resistance to signing that partnership.
You know, if there's any sense that the word neo-colonial is one I take strong issue with. There's a colonial past that exists between Europe and many African countries that we cannot wish away. But that said, we have been trying to commit ourselves in deep and meaningful ways with various individual African countries, African regions, in the African Union. I think it is time that we moved beyond.
How many countries have signed that agreement?
Well, the ESA community has. We are very close when it comes to the ECOWAS, Western African countries. We are close with the SADC countries. Trade Commissioner has just paid a visit to Trade Minister Rob Davies a few weeks back, and I'm confident that we are close to a conclusion here, and I hope to be able to discuss that also later today with Phyllis Kandia.
What is making it difficult for countries to sign?
I think there's an institutional reluctance on the one hand.
What does that mean?
I think that what that means is it is still difficult for the regional economic communities, such as the East African community, to pull together and realize that this thing is more innocent than is often thought. I've always said, if there's a hidden agenda from the European Union, please explain to me what it is. It's high time that we conclude. Time is running out. And I would hate if, in addition to our phytosanitary issues, we would actually run into a time that we would have to reimpose GSP tariffs instead of the current zero tariff. Now, that GSP tariff is still cheaper and at a lower rate than Kenyan producers would have to pay for exporting to other countries like China or Russia. I'm taking the example of cut flowers, for example. So I mean, we have to realize that it's quite important that we start really. We can no longer sit on our hands.
I mean, even looking at some of the comments coming in, this is Odidi Owiti, who basically looks at the partnership with a takes it with a pinch of salt, saying it's all about neocolonialism, and seems not to believe this whole partnership issue. How do you convince such a person? Of course, you're dealing with countries, but
listen, I think that if you look at the facts of our relations, the investment, I can even put it differently, you know, looking at people. We said people, prosperity, peace. Look at the people, even the EU delegation here. The number of Africans in the delegation, the number of even individuals who may be European, married to Africans. You know, we are not a bunch of Muzungus trying to impose old colonial systems on African countries. But this is such an outdated issue, and you know, it is complete and utter nonsense. So, if you look at what we are doing in terms of our humanitarian assistance, take Dadaab, take the refugee issues, serious as they are in South Sudan, where we are investing at this moment, what is it, some 20 billion shillings in humanitarian assistance. Take our development programs, and as I said, building on Kenya's own priorities. Take our security and stability partnership. Take the anti-piracy efforts. Is that neocolonialism, or is it assisting? Also in our own interest, I grant that easily. But it is not something, what I do not accept is this suggestion that somehow we are only pursuing our own interests. It's just not true.
But actually, the fact is that the economic partnership is an initiative of Europe. It's not an African initiative.
It is an initiative that has been committed to by all African countries individually when they signed the Cotonou Agreement. And if you look at Article 36, 37 of that agreement, it is not only an European initiative.
So
and I am a strong believer that therefore there has to be an appropriate developmental component in it. And if in the development matrix of that economic partnership agreement that we have actually agreed to, of course nothing is agreed to, everything is agreed and all that kind of stuff, it says very clearly that we will also look at the issue of supply side constraints that African countries may still be facing when entering or when trying to enter the European market. And therefore some of our development programs are going to have to help ease those supply side constraints. I think it's quite important. So let's get and move beyond Mutegi. It's a fervent plea, this whole notion of neocolonialism. We're not there.
Right. There's a gentleman here, Kagame, Divan Kagame, who is a bit concerned, says it's impossible, it can't work because most of African heads of state are dictators who can't impress the international law.
You know, you mentioned the ICC earlier. We must understand that 2 cases against 3 individuals are not going to bring the closure and the justice that many Kenyans, victims of the 2007-2008 PV, feel they want. I'm a firm believer in that. Is that a sensitive statement? Yes, it is a sensitive statement. But I think it's important to put it on record. We are firmly of the view that this is a Kenyan matter. It is also a matter about individual criminal responsibility. And obviously we are looking at it. We're all signatories, all the EU member states of the ICC treaty. So we look at it. But I think it's quite important for us to also realize that Kenyans have expressed their vote in elections which were transparent and held in accordance with Kenyan law. The Supreme Court found that as well. Our EU election observers, other election observers found the same. So we must take that into consideration and not sort of wag a finger from 8,000 miles away. It makes no sense. So I think that even if cultures may be different, and we have to recognize that cultures are different, we must work with African leaders. And I find the whole notion to start referring to African leaders, African dictators, a bit stark. We are dealing, and I must admit that I'm actually a great believer in the young leadership that this country has moved to last year. I think it would be useful to see possibly more cohesive strategic direction emerge from the center. That said, you know, I'm a firm supporter of what I see happening in this country.
Right. But historically, if you look at the relationship between Europe and America and Africa, particularly in this kind